True View. Thank you so much for joining us here today on our new set. And you can see we also have some guests with us today, Julie. We're so grateful that you all have joined us. We have Gina, Nancy, and Kate. All of them are mothers, wives, and we're really excited to be talking about these parenting topics today. In fact, we're going to be starting with enabling is disabling. How can we raise responsible children?
Jamie, there seems to be a fad anymore that is even getting widespread attention of being called the helicopter mom, and that's because people tend to hover over their children instead of raising them and discipling and disciplining. It's like we're just kind of just like a helicopter would be, just kind of over them all the time. And there's an article that really gives a great portrayal of how epidemic this is and really almost how pathetic as the person says it is. But this is from AP writer Martha Irvine, and she tells us how well-intentioned but overly doting parents find it impossible to let go, even as their kids are ready to graduate from college. And just listen to this. Some parents are even writing their college-age kids' resumes. Others are acting as their children's representatives, hounding college career counselors, showing up at job fairs, and sometimes going as far as calling employers to ask why their sons or their daughters didn't get a job. And some of them even that whole area of going, my child didn't get a promotion, what's wrong? You know, everybody gets a trophy kind of a thing. It's the next phase in helicopter parenting, she goes on to write, a term coined for those who've hovered over their children's lives from kindergarten to college. Now they're inserting themselves into their kids' job search, and school officials and employers say it's a problem that may be hampering some young people's careers. As Michael Ellis says, the director of career and life education at Delaware Valley College, I'm sure he's not speaking alone, it's now reached epidemic proportions. But Jamie, what we know is this isn't something that starts at the point where the parents are seeing their child go off to college, but it usually is something that starts when they are young and in the home and during those preschool, school age times.
Well, that's a very intense, I guess, example. I personally can't imagine doing any of those things, but what I will say is in preparing for this show and this topic, the more I dug into what does it mean to be enabling, I realized I am far more enabling than I ever thought I was. I thought because I wasn't actually doing my kids' homework that I deserved like a pat on the back and I wasn't enabling them. But what I saw instead is that I was constantly picking up after my kids, putting their shoes away, putting their backpack away, waking them up in the morning if they didn't, wake up to their alarm clock, driving them, if they left something at home for band or their lunch, I would drive it to school. Feeling bad for them, or if they broke something, I'd be wanting to go buy something and replace it for them. And the biggest thing that came to mind is I feel like I am like their personal reminder, reminding them, did you brush your teeth? Did you brush your hair? We have to leave in 5 minutes. And I found that I was just this motor mouth, and really all those reminders, I just didn't realize how enabling it was.
Well, and I think, Jamie, as we look at it even, we need to understand that why this can be a problem isn't just because you're raising children who don't know how to raise themselves, and aren't going to go off and be a responsible adult, which is clearly the goal that we have as parents, is that they're going to sometime be self-sufficient, they're going to be able to manage their lives on their own in a way that's successful. And the Bible, again, because it's the most practical book in the world, tells us, even in Ezekiel 18:20, the son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son, and we would add to that mother, of course. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. And as we look at that, what we can clearly see is, if you are a hovering parent, you're going to get to the point where your child is not going to know how to stand up on their own and take accountability for their own actions, because they're always going to be able to blame, mom didn't do it for me, dad didn't do it for
and last
me.
I checked, at any great judgment in the Bible, your mom doesn't get to come with you.
That's for sure.
So I have to ask the question, what would you say, ladies, is the greatest challenge for you in allowing your children to accept personal responsibility?
Well, I think for myself, it's just I have 5 children, and a lot of times it just feels faster just to do it for myself. And if they really don't do what they're supposed to do, it affects the entire family, and then I feel like we're getting punished too, and it's just a lot of times we don't have time. to
I
do it.
understand that, Nancy. You know, raising 4 children, it didn't have that 5th one, but that is easy, where sometimes it at least seems, okay, if they haven't picked up the house or whatever, it's just easier for me to do it than to call them in and do that, press that reminder button, as Jamie was talking about, to do it. So, yeah,
Right.
I can understand how that happens.
I kind of feel on the opposite end of the spectrum. I have 5 kids also, and I homeschool, and I have ranges from 14 to 3. So I tend to be, definitely I follow through with, you know, consequences. If you didn't do what you're supposed to, there's a consequence. But it gets to the point sometimes where I feel like I'm divvying out consequences all day. You know, oh, you didn't do this when I told you to. Oh, that wasn't obedience. You know, here's a consequence. So it's finding that balance for me of not being the dictator in my home and not enabling them, but also still being
Sure.
nurturing and loving and,
Making sure
and
you're
gracious,
getting to the
showing
heart
grace.
of the issue and the heart of the child versus just getting a behavior modification. You want a heart transformation, not just the behavior modification.
Exactly, and that's a struggle sometimes.
I can understand that.
Well, I totally have the same problem as, you know, both ladies discussed. Of course, I only have 2 children, so I'm luckier than all of you in that regard for time and patience.
That means you're going to be the perfect parent, Gina, because you've only
Which
got
is
2.
funny because I don't think I am. I don't think any of us are. But I find that following through is something that I do, but I don't do. Because of what Nancy said. It is so much easier just to go ahead and pick it up and get it done. You can get it done without the whining, the crying, the screaming, the fights. It just becomes so much easier for yourself personally. And it just comes to taking that time, putting it in with your children, and just letting them know that these are their jobs and this is their responsibility and they need to do it.
I think it's important to explain to them why it's important to, not that you have to do it because I said so, but you know, you're contributing to being part of this family. You know, you have responsibilities in this family as well. In order for us to function as a family, we all have to work together. And I do find myself saying that over and over and over again. I can't do everything. We have to work together. We're a team. And just reminding them.
And that's, I think, such an important aspect, Kate, is for them to understand the greatest team, and we're going to have another talk about team sports and all those things and the benefits, but the greatest team that you're ever put in is your family team, and to understand. And you know what you're saying, to the rest of you ever run into that, though, where you feel like every time you are given a directive that immediately the response is why?
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
That gets exhausting. You know, and that's something I realized happens with enabling. When we're enabling and not realizing that we are, like I said I was, I found too that I was getting a lot of questioning, like they wanted to know why, and I realized, you know what, I'm trying to be their savior instead of teaching them that they have a savior, and his name is Jesus. It's not me. And so that being, as a parent, recognizing and taking a step back, and we've done this now in our own home, taking a step back and saying, I am loving you enough to teach you personal responsibility. You may not like it, but we're not having a conversation about this. Guess what? Every time I sense in my prayer time God telling me something, I don't have the luxury of saying why, and he doesn't give it to us. We're told to obey because he's God, you know, and out of our love for him. And I am teaching that now and taking that time with the kids to really share that.
Well, I find I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I find myself saying to my kids a lot, my son especially, he's 7, he says to me all the time, well, you're not the boss of me. This is his new thing he's been saying, and I say to him, I am the boss of you, and what I've been trying to explain to him is, God has trusted me as your parent. This is what we are doing. You will follow my rules. And to a child, it may seem more like a punishment, but it's not punishment, it's discipline, just to help them in life.
Gina, I'm so glad to hear that you say that, because I think so many parents would allow something like that to go, and especially if it's their cute little kid saying that, and just laugh and kind of go, oh, isn't that cute? That, you know,
It's cute at 4, not at 14.
It's not even cute at 4.
Well, and what's funny, Gina, is Hebrews 12:11. This is from the Amplified. Says, "For the time being, no discipline brings joy, but seems grievous and painful. But afterwards, it yields a peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who've been trained by it, a harvest of fruit which consists in righteousness, in conformity to God's will and purpose, thought and action, resulting in right living and right standing with God." And I believe if you asked any one of us, that's truly what we want in our hearts for our child, is to receive that peaceable fruit in life, to have peace. Or the command that says, honor thy mother and thy father, for you will live long.
And if we want, and I would, Jamie, that was something, you know, I'm the one that's got the oldest children here, that range from 4 children from 30 to 22 years old, and that was one of the things I would say to them. Number one, Gina, along the lines, yes, I am your boss, and boss in the sense that God has placed me in authority, and just as God, I have to submit to God, you are required to submit to me, and what purpose? For your good. Because he has entrusted me, I have greater wisdom, I have greater knowledge, I have greater understanding, and quite honestly, even if I didn't, it's still the position that I hold, and you are to respect that. One of the things, I don't know if you've all heard of John Roseman, but he's one of my favorite parenting experts. But this was something that I raised our children on. And they could quote it because it was on our refrigerator. And we put it on a cardboard and had it, and it says, of course you don't agree with me. I don't expect you to agree with me. If I were a child, I wouldn't agree with me either. But I am not the child. I am the parent, and you will do what you're told. And you know, that seems in so many ways that is summed up. And like I said, my kids at this age could easily recite that to you. If I started it, they'd sure finish the rest of it. But you know, that really was that place. And you know, going to your point, Kate, I think there are times where it is very important to explain the whys. But I also think we have to discern there's times where because I say so is good enough.
Right. And I also think it's important to remind our children that, you know, a lot of children, they don't want an authority figure. They think, you know, but I think it's important to remind them that throughout life, there is always going to be someone they're going to need to submit to, even beyond us. You know, obviously there's God, the ultimate authority, but you're going to have a boss someday. And he's going to tell you to do something that you don't want to do, but yet it's your job, you need to do it. Or, you know, you're going to have, you know, if it's a girl, you're going to have your husband, you're going to have to submit. So it's an important skill to learn that you
or
just...
Or the government with taxes and go,
yeah,
I don't really want to submit to
that.
Yeah. But gotta do it.
Exactly.
I really want to ask them why.
Right. Police
Why so
officers
much,
You are not
right?
the boss of me. So what do you guys think is the emotion really behind that desire that I think a lot of women have to hover?
I think the world can be a big influence, honestly, and that's something that I think a lot of Christians struggle with. You want to have a perfect student. You want a very obedient child. You want everything to be in a perfect little package. But who is it for?
Yeah.
Is it for someone else? Is it for you? And it shouldn't be for you. It should be for the glory of God. Right. And I think that's something that is a big struggle.
I think you're right, Gina.
I think God broke me very quickly of being a hovering parent because, you know, with the first one I could, second one I could. By the time I got to the fifth, that girl at 3 picks out her outfits and what she wears to church and her hair's a mess and I'm like, I just don't care. You know, with 5 children you can't hover. It's just, right. You know, or you'll just kill yourself. You'll crash and burn. So,
well, and I think, Kate, there too is that whole principle of parenting, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
It is harder to do that if you've got 1 or 2 kids. By the time you get to 5, you know, 4 or 5, those small things, it's like, oh, that didn't even get on my radar, you know. The kid went off without their hair being combed. Oh, big deal. You know, that's not going to kill them today. Yeah.
It's really looking and redefining the role of mom. You know, what determines successful parenting? Oftentimes, I get the sense it's the mom who does the most, thinks that they're the most successful, or that when it says that we are to help our child, that somehow means doing it for them. And when I looked at the list that I came up with myself after doing the research, it was all picking up, driving, buying, doing, taking, reminding. They were all action words. Do, doing. And I just think, but really, it's not the one who does the most, but the one who is disciplining her child. You know, that's the doing we should be doing. Not the rest of that. And we'll have so much more time and freedom to do those when we're practicing that way.
Well, we had just, us 3 ladies that drove together this morning, we were talking about that the super mom versus the abiding mom. And it was just, we were just talking about that, and the super mom has that to-do list and is into this, and the abiding mom is just looking to God for direction. And as moms, that's honestly what we have to do daily, is just looking to God.
I love that, Kate. You
Yeah.
guys need to write together a lot more.
Good talks.
It was fun. We had a good time.
You guys are, you know, that's truly one of the things that I think so few of us know how to abide and rest. And the hovering mom is anything but the picture of rest and peace and abiding. You see frazzled and frustrated and exhausted and exasperated.
The super mom's looking for those outside pleasing the outside people, pleasing everyone around. The abiding mom is looking to please God and raise godly children. And you parent differently if you're the abiding mom and the super mom.
Yeah. And keeping that long-term goal in mind versus that short-term, today, my child, you know, we've made it through the day, you know, breathe a sigh of relief of somehow I fall into bed versus, okay, I want to train them in righteousness and in godliness for the fear and admonition of the Lord. Right. But again, so that when I'm not here, just as you said, Jamie, that I'm not their savior, but it's kind of that baton that they're going to be at that place where they know I've passed that along, that they can look to someone else who's always going to be able to be with them and really shelter them.
And Kate, you had mentioned that you sometimes feel like you're just handing out consequences all day. Give us an example of what some of those might be.
I can just start with this morning.
Fresh example.
My kids have just morning checklists of things they need to do before they start school. And, you know, they're supposed to check, you know, before they do anything else, they're supposed to get their morning things done and check them off. And it was just as simple as in, you know, I had one who was off playing. And I looked at his list and it wasn't done. And it was like, you know, I've told you before, your list needs to be checked. Like, you have a consequence. When you get home from school, he's the one that does go to school. I said, you have an extra chore. But I feel like that happens so often, you know, so it's like you're starting the day right away with, an extra chore, or, you know, and then it was again, okay, you're off playing, and you said you did these things, but the list is not checked. So again, now you have another one. So it's just like you feel like you start piling it on. And I say it calmly, but at the same time, you know, I don't want to bury the kid and make him feel discouraged. So it's finding that balance of not discouraging them and burying these consequences and looking at that heart of the child.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, even as you're saying that too, anybody who has more than one child may find that there's a particular child in your family. You have to do that with more.
Yes.
And that can be a real challenge to the rest of you.
Yes.
Have that. I think we all do. Again, if you have
Yes.
multiple kids and you relate differently, their personalities, and where you can feel that way, and to, I think it can help also when you're meeting out some of those consequences to look at how do I affirm them when they are doing it the
Right.
way it should be done, because sometimes they can feel all I'm ever hearing is what I'm doing wrong and what I've missed it versus wow, and the reward being your praise, not okay, you get to go get ice cream or you're getting money or something else, but that intrinsic versus extrinsic reward.
And sometimes you have to work harder at that. You have to really, okay, today I'm going to make sure I give them that and really look for it, because when you have 5 kids or a big family or even just 2 kids, you can forget to, you're focused on the negative, and you can forget to tell them, hey, great job, I saw today you did do your checklist. You know, and I have marbles. My kids get marbles, and the marbles, if you do something good, you get a marble, and it can lead to something else, you know, a date with mom and dad and those kind of things. You know, and to say, hey, great job, you got a marble. But you can forget that. You focus it on the negative sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder.
One of the things I forget is the consequence. I tell my kids they have a consequence, and then I wake up the next day and I'm like, shoot, I did not make them go to bed an hour early. That was one of the things that I liked, is kind of looking at what are some natural consequences we can give our children, and logical consequences that we can give them depending on what they do. And I discovered, you know, if you're not waking up when your alarm clock goes off, so you're not waking up on your own, a logical or a natural consequence of that is obviously you're not going to have as much time to get ready, but also then that tells me you need to go to bed an hour earlier, because obviously you were so sleepy you couldn't get up. And then I forgot to put them in bed early. And I thought, I need a checklist for myself to make sure that I'm actually following through. I find that was more my challenge. Nancy, did you guys have anything in your home where it helped you to follow through, or what does that look like in your home?
I can totally relate with what you said, that I have a very difficult time, number one, coming up with a consequence that is meaningful, because I'm more of a deliberative thinker and speaker. I like to think things through and have some time to come up with things. So for me to quickly come up with a consequence that is meaningful and then remember it whenever it's time to actually give it, because a lot of times things happen when you're walking out the door or something of that nature, and I really struggle with remembering it. So I have not found a solution to that yet.
I've been using voice memo on my phone, not kidding, and even bought a sticky dry erase thing that can stick to my side of my refrigerator, where I can just jot a note to myself. It doesn't need to be something that when visitors come to my home, I'm calling a child out.
Right.
But it can be something that I can write for myself as a reminder. Oh yeah, tonight, early to bed for this one, you know? because that is definitely something where my mind's just racing all the time, and I can just get to the end of the day and realize, oh my goodness, I said this and I didn't do it. And I think that's one of the greatest problems with parenting is that follow through. If we're not following through, we're not going to see, the result.
Well, and I think too, for any of us who have animals, we've kind of been, brainwashed to think, okay, if it's not an immediate consequence, then I can't mete it out. And I think when it comes to parenting, it's important to go to them and sometimes say, like you were saying, Nancy, about being a deliberative thinker, you don't have to come up with what that consequence is right then. Just let them know that was an unacceptable behavior. And I'm going to need some time to really think about what it is that we're going to need to do so I can help you to learn. And at the same time, I think it's important to even say, you know what, I forgot last night to put you to bed an hour earlier. And so part of the consequence for me is I need to come up with a way to help remind me, and you're being vulnerable and transparent with your children and letting them see you're human, but at the same token saying, you know what, that my not remembering doesn't mean you're off the hook. There still is going to be a consequence for you, and even if it's 2 or 3 days later, that's okay, as long as you, again, communicate with them.
And the consequences have to be age appropriate. When you were saying that, I was thinking age appropriate. Like, you can't do that with a 3-year-old. You can't
Good
say,
point.
Right.
later on I'm going to address this because it's gone, they've forgotten. And they also have to be consequences that are appropriate, like I said, for that age.
Excellent point.
Well, as well as for their personality, as we were speaking to earlier. I mean, my 10-year-old and my 7-year-old, one's a boy, one's a girl, and they are completely different in every aspect of everything. And not just because one's a boy and one's a girl, they are just different. One is more emotional, one is very stubborn. You just have to make sure that the punishment fits the crime. It's not necessarily a punishment, but the disciplinary action that you take with them for the child, for their personality.
And when you said that discipline is supposed to be to change the child's heart. So exactly, the natural consequences are good. So we're not just supposed to punish them and condemn them for their behavior. The point of discipline is to teach.
Absolutely.
So that is why those natural consequences are just so important.
Just another example, my kids make their lunch before they go to school, and they happen to just leave it. They forgot to take their lunch to school. So I was thankful that the school provides them a hot lunch in that case. But when they got home, they were like, oh, I forgot my lunch, but we had hot lunch. And I said, well, you have to pay for that hot lunch.
That was a good one.
And for my children, they're 8, 10, and 12. They understand that because they are at a point now where they're getting an allowance. So for them to have to pay for their own hot lunch, all of a sudden they were not forgetting their lunch. And I thought that is so helpful to just think of those. These are all ways that can keep us from being that hovering parent, because I feel like when they are gone, I want them to recognize if you forget, you forget. No one's coming to save you. There is, in that way.
When you're talking about forgetting consequences, one thing that popped into my mind was oftentimes we'll keep lists. So special privileges would be technology, dessert, staying up late. So a lot of times I will do a ticket type system or like a checklist, and then you don't forget because they'll say, hey, can I play my Wii? And you go, let me look at the list. Oh no, you haven't done what you're supposed to today. So you don't get that special privilege. So that was just another way of helping. I was thinking when you said that, of helping you to remember because it's just there.
And even sometimes along that line, if someone isn't maybe that organized, Kate, but even to have on your refrigerator a calendar that has it listed, the person's name, and know this week your responsibilities are setting the table, or this week it's to clean up. And, in some homes that might vary from week to week, even day to day, but the more consistent you can be and explaining to them in advance, this is what your expectation is. Yeah, I think that's so important too. I know, Jamie, you and I had talked about as well that one of the challenges I think that a lot of parents have is keeping their house clean, and especially when you have multiple kids. Does any of the rest of you ever, and you're going, okay, I don't want to feel like it's got to look like a museum, but at the same token, I don't want it to look like it's, where it's a trap for everybody to fall in, or if somebody comes spur of the moment to the door, you're going, oh my gosh, quick, we got to, hide everything into the closet, which can happen. And we were talking, Jamie and I were, because one of the things that I'd heard about that had helped with my children in raising them was to have something called the Saturday box, that each day the kids would know that there is something that they need they need to make sure before they go to bed at night that they've been responsible to pick up any of their items that are just their items that they've left in the common areas. And if they get left behind, then that's something that it goes into the Saturday box. And that might be their backpack if they knew it was supposed to be in the bedroom, and it might be where
I have to share this because this is just plain funny. So Julie told me about this again in preparation for the show. I go, that's an awesome idea. And I have to tell you, I decide whether or not it's a good parenting tip by my children's responses. When they completely have a meltdown, I go, oh, we are onto something. So I said, if you guys don't have your homework in your folders and they're not put away, it's going in the Saturday box and you can have it again on Saturday. And my little guy, his lip starts cooking, goes, you mean you just want to make us have F's? I said, and this was such a simple tip, and I'm so glad you shared it, because I said, no, I would not be making you get an F. Your choice to not be responsible for your stuff would be making you get an F. And then it's allowing that natural consequence to fall, where if it is a Monday or Tuesday and you left it out, it's in the Saturday box. You can have it back and turn it in late. But that's not my fault. But it was so funny to see that immediate, wanting to just freak out over that.
Well, it's them putting the blame back on you,
Yes.
not taking personal responsibility for their actions. My daughter has a notebook that comes home every day from school, and the parent is supposed to sign it. And last year she was in third grade, and I was starting to push away from just picking it up and signing it on my own. This year, I don't pick it up and sign it at all. She has to come to me. But last year, it had started where, why didn't you sign my book? You didn't sign my book. You didn't sign my book.
Right.
Then it turned into, oh, did you sign my book? And now it's just, oh, Mommy, did you sign my book? So it is baby steps to get there, but they need to pay attention.
Well, and I think that's the exact way that we get away from this idea of being such a hovering parent. Because, Proverbs 22:6, which is such a familiar verse to many, says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. Think about if the way you trained them up in the way that they should go was that you were there as their savior all along. Guess what? When they are old, they are not going to depart from that, which means they're going to be the ones coming, constantly needing your help and picking up the pieces of their broken lives because of that hovering that is why we titled the show Enabling is Disabling, because it really disables them from that. And we're just so thankful that you were able to join us here today for our TrueView topic, Enabling is Disabling.
Legion honors our newest generation of warriors and veterans. Please join us in supporting and recognizing their unique contributions and needs. Go to legion.org/honor veterans to find out more.
Getting old is horrible, okay? Horrible.
You're not old.
Oh, Melissa, come on, look at me, grow up. The only men that hit on me these days are undertakers.
I don't want to talk about this.
You've got to understand what's going to happen. You've got to understand my needs. You've got to understand my wants.
No, la.
Don't give me la.
I can't
Talk
do this.
to your family about aging, even if they're not ready to listen.
No matter who you are, it's not easy talking about aging. For help, go to voa.org/talk. A message from Volunteers of America.
Filing for Social Security online. 9 out of 10 experts agree it's groovier than a Brooklyn hot dog. Or Crepes is it.
When cousins are to overcome.